Hello and welcome into this afternoon edition of Locked On Capitals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. My name is Dan Holme. I've covered the Capitals for the past 4 seasons for Locked On and various other outlets before that. I'm also the host of the weekly show called The Capitals Minutecast, available wherever you find your podcasts. And as always, I want to thank you for making this your first listen of the day and for making Locked On the #1 sports podcast network. So in this edition of Locked On Capitals, we talk about the impact of Pierre-Luc Dubois, a guy that has been out since late October. How is it that he was able to hit the ground running in the very first game? A bit later, we'll talk about Jakob Chychrun as a franchise defenseman, that there's a lot of questions on the blue line with Carlson and TVR in contract years. So let me just say it right now, that when Pierre-Luc Dubois came back, the Capitals didn't just get a center. They got the soul of their lineup back. And I say that not hyperbolically, but, you just take a look at it. What are the odds that a guy misses that much time and makes such a huge impact? And I still say this, and I don't want this to be lost, that I would still temper expectations. It was a singular game against not a truly great Predators team, that it was good. He got a goal, right? He got an assist. But the Capitals still need more. And I still stick to the fact that the Capitals need to make more moves. I mean, listen, this was the band that got to the second round of the playoffs last year, but still got extinguished. That Pierre-Luc Dubois is an upgrade. There is no doubt. But the Capitals still need more. And also, when Jakob Chychrun touched the puck Thursday night, it felt like destiny. The Caps beat Nashville 4-2, heading into the Olympic break with juice, with belief, with something they haven't had: consistency all season, and an identity. So let's talk about why PLD matters more than any stat sheet. Later, we'll talk about why Jakob Chychrun just might be the most important player on the roster. And let's talk about what this win actually means in the playoff race. So in segment 1, we'll talk about PLD. Pierre-Luc Dubois is the Capitals' identity, making an impact. Listen, Spencer Carberry said he didn't expect him to wear a cape and go out there and save the team, but he kind of did. Because I don't care, if he finished with 1 goal and 1 assist. I don't care if he looked a little gassed. And I don't care, he said, quote, "There were a few times I thought I might throw up," unquote. At the end of the day, his cardiovascular health, I don't think, is right where it needs to be. And jumping out of the frying pan and into the fire, going from, with skills coach Kenny McCudden to playing an NHL game, there's going to be a little bit of a gap in your production and all of those things. But, honestly, that just makes it better, because Pierre-Luc Dubois hadn't played an NHL game in 47 games after that adduction surgery. 47. That's crazy, isn't it? And, that's basically an entire season in hockey time. And what happens in his first game back? Goal. And not like a meh goal, like I'm going to punch it through the net. Assist. Positive shot share, positive scoring chance share, positive high danger chance share. And what did we see? +4 shot attempts, +7 shots on goal, +3 scoring chances, +6 high danger chances. Now, when you look at that, that's not coincidence. That's not gravity. That's structure. That is a center who stabilizes everything. Now, you could feel it watching. The Caps were heavier, more connected, cleaner through the neutral zone, more decisive below the dots. And, PLD isn't flashy in like a TikTok way. He's flashy in a your team suddenly makes sense kind of way. And listen to what Dubois said about being back on the bench. He said, quote, "Being on the bench with everybody, the highs, but also the lows, and hearing the leadership group, that's always fun," unquote. Now, when you look at PLD and what they got, what did they get in PLD in his return? It's not just any player, right? He is a guy that has excelled at every level. Had that one-off year with the Kings, but all things considered, a guy with a great hockey IQ. The Capitals got back one of their biggest missing pieces. But listening to him talk about being on the bench and how exciting that is, that's culture talk, that's identity talk. And, that's how this team knows who it is again, right? That everything felt better. And you saw Strome and Chychrun just elated with Chychrun's goal, that it just seems like the fun times are surrounding this team again. But, here's my take on the whole thing. The Capitals without Dubois, they were surviving. The Capitals with Dubois can compete. Again, in a one-game sample here, that was my take on it. Now, there's a difference. No cup favorites, no world beaters, but dangerous, annoying, hard to play against, which is exactly how the Capitals have to be built in 2026. But let's be real. The coaching staff has been trying all season to duct tape a middle six center solution together. And we've seen that, right? That I think that sort of did a pretty good job, all things considered. You saw all kinds of centers. You saw Strome, Dowd. They tried everything, up the middle there. But, PLD coming back ends that experiment, because Dylan Strome, suddenly doesn't have to be everything. McMichael slots better. The wings don't have to cheat for offense. And it feels like everything kind of just slides into place. That's what elite centers do. That's who PLD is. They don't just score. They organize. The Caps didn't just get a player back. They got their spine back. And that is an encouraging sign as the Caps enter into the Olympic break, and even more exciting about what this team will look like after the break. All right, so coming up here after the break, Jakob Chychrun is playing like a franchise defenseman. I'll discuss straight ahead. It's last call for football on FanDuel. One final Sunday, one last kickoff, the final chance to get in on the action before the NFL season officially comes to close. This is Super Bowl 60, and FanDuel is making sure you're right in the middle of it with a special offer just in time for the biggest game of the year. Whether you're backing the favorite, riding with the underdog, or building one last same-game parlay, this is the game everyone's been waiting for. This is where predictions turn into plays, stats turn into storylines, and every snap feels bigger. It's the perfect way to cap off the season and make the Super Bowl even more exciting from kickoff to the final whistle. If you're a new customer, bet just $5 and get $200 in bonus bets if you win. Make it count, because after Super Bowl, the season is over. Last call for football on FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of Super Bowl 60. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. If you've ever hired someone who looked good on paper but wasn't the right fit, you know how important that is. When you want candidates who truly match what you're looking for, trust Indeed sponsored jobs. Hiring Indeed is all you need. Stop struggling to get your job post seen on other sites. Indeed sponsored jobs puts your post at the top of the page and helps you reach the right candidates faster. Instead of struggling to get your job post seen, Indeed sponsored jobs helps your listing stand out and reach quality candidates faster. Sponsored jobs boost your post to the people who are the best match for your role, and that makes a real difference. Listen, I use Indeed at my job. I think you should as well. It makes my job so much easier. So spend more time interviewing candidates who check all your boxes with less stress, less time, and more results using Indeed sponsored jobs. Listeners of this show get a $75 sponsored job credit to help your job get the premium placement it deserves at Indeed.com/lockedon. Just go to Indeed.com/lockedon right now and support the show by saying you heard about it on the Locked On Capitals podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Hiring, do it the right way with Indeed. All right, welcome back into this edition of Locked On Capitals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So let's dive into it here in the second segment of this afternoon edition of Locked On Capitals. Talking about Jakob Chychrun is playing like a franchise defenseman, because I'm going to say it. Chychrun is having the best season by a Capitals defenseman since Mike Green, prime Mike Green. And honestly, it might be even more impressive if you ask me, because, here's the thing. He's doing it in a harder scoring era. Chychrun on Thursday night, 2 goals, an assist, 7 shots, 11 shot attempts, 29-21 of ice time, game-winning goal, insurance goal. Oh yeah, the superlatives keep rolling. Because here's why it's important. John Carlson leaves the game, so Chychrun just casually decides to become, well, the entire blue line. So let's talk about that goal. Spinorama. Passes it to himself, walks around a forward like he's a traffic cone, and rips a snapshot from 47 feet. I'm going to say it's the defenseman goal of the year contender. And, when you look at it, seeing is believing. Chychrun now has 21 goals at the Olympic break, most among all NHL defensemen. Back-to-back 20-goal seasons, only the second defenseman in franchise history to do that. Who's the other guy? If you don't know, I'll tell you, Larry Murphy. That's Hall of Fame territory. And Carb said it best. He said, quote, he's scoring not only big goals and big moments, but they're essentially individual efforts. He can create something out of nothing. That's the difference between a good player and a franchise player. Because when you look at it, Chychrun doesn't need perfect systems. He doesn't need perfect line mates. What does he do? He just solves problems. And, my take on the whole thing is Chychrun should be the Capitals' long-term defensive cornerstone. I think that is the case. Not Carlson, not whoever emerges, Chychrun. He's it. And, everything should be built around him on the blue line. Power play runs through him. Transition game runs through him. Matchups run through him. He's 27. This is ultimately his prime. Ride it. Let's be honest for a second. The underlying numbers in his game, not great. Nashville out-attempted the Caps, out-chanced them, out-high-dangered them. Expected goals favored Nashville. That's real. But you know what else is real? Logan Thompson, 27 saves on 29 shots, plus 1.63 goals saved above expected. An absolute stud. Now, stealing points is part of the playoff DNA. Good teams do it. Great goalies enable it. The Capitals have that right now. So zooming out, 30,000-foot view, 4 points behind the Islanders for third in the Metro, 4 points behind Boston for the final wild card spot. With Dubois back, with Chychrun playing like an absolute beast, with Thompson locked in, the season is not over, not even close. So to wrap up this afternoon edition, this wasn't about style. It wasn't about, analytic charts. It was about belief, right? That Pierre-Luc Dubois reminded the Caps who they are. Chychrun reminded the league who he is. And the Capitals head into the break with something dangerous, hope. And something the Capitals fans, I don't think, had going before this was hope. So encouraging. Listen, I want to thank you for joining me on this afternoon edition of Locked On Capitals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And I'll talk to you again next time.